I hadn't meant to linger that long by the counter, but her voice stopped me. "You're making it hard to resist you." She said it as if it were casual, but the way her fingers brushed against the stack of ledgers, her wrist twitching just slightly, made my chest tighten. I wanted to step back, to let the moment dissolve into the background hum of the repair shop, but instead I leaned just a fraction closer and said, "Then don't resist." The shop smelled faintly of motor oil and coffee, a mix that somehow fit her, too. She had that quiet authority you notice before you even look at her face. The way she shifted her weight, confident but not loud, aware of every inch of space she occupied. I caught the subtle twitch of her jaw when she realized I was staring, and she didn't look away. She rarely did. I worked here, part-time, fixing whatever customers brought in and occasionally wrestling with the cash register. She walked in most mornings, not just to supervise, but to quietly observe. Mid-40s, a little past the age where you could casually assume someone wouldn't notice you. And yet, there was something in the tilt of her head, the curve of her smile that felt like it belonged just to me. Today, she wore a soft gray blouse tucked neatly into dark trousers, sleeves rolled to her elbows. I noticed the faint scent of lavender and something else, maybe a hint of smoke from her old leather jacket. There was a pause then, awkward and electric. Neither of us spoke, though our eyes met over the counter for a fraction of a heartbeat that stretched too long. I felt my fingers curl around the wrench I'd been holding, my knuckles white. She rested her hands lightly on the counter, fingertips grazing the laminated surface. It was such a small thing, almost nothing, but it felt deliberate. I caught myself wondering if she meant for me to notice, and if she did, what it meant that I did. I remember the way she tilted her head, almost imperceptibly, and exhaled as though letting me in on a private joke. "Don't make this any harder than it already is," she murmured, her voice softer now, a tremor beneath the controlled confidence. I could only manage a smile, the kind that felt clumsy on my face, but I couldn't stop looking at her. She turned then, lifting a stack of papers with a practiced ease, and for a moment, I wanted to follow the line of her back, the slow sway of her hips, the effortless way she moved. I shook my head quickly, trying to clear the thought, but it refused to leave. Even as she walked away, there was a weight behind her presence, something magnetic I couldn't explain. The customers came and went, engines revving, tires squealing, the fluorescent lights buzzing above, but I barely noticed. I was still there, frozen in the aftershock of that pause, replaying her glance, the way her fingers lingered on the counter, the almost imperceptible smirk that told me she knew exactly what she was doing. I wiped my hands on a rag I didn't need and tried to focus on the next task, but I kept catching myself looking at the door, hoping she'd return sooner than necessary. Hoping, for some unspoken reason, that the world would shrink to just the space between us again. And when I finally glanced at the counter one last time before grabbing a toolbox, I caught the flicker in her eyes, brief, almost imperceptible, but enough. Enough to make me think that maybe, just maybe, she was thinking about me too. I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I knew, even then, that I would never see her the same way again. I found myself under the hood of a stubborn engine, the metal cold beneath my fingers, but I wasn't really focused on the work. She leaned over beside me, arms folded, watching more than helping, her posture rigid, as if she were guarding herself against something I couldn't name. "Did you check the spark plugs?" she asked, voice clipped but not unkind. She kept her gaze just past me, on the engine, on the wall, anywhere but my face. I nodded, wiping grease off my hands. "Yeah, looks fine. I'll try adjusting the timing." Her eyes flicked to mine then, quick and precise, like she was measuring me, and I caught the faintest twitch in her lips. She's always like this, strong, composed, never letting anyone really see what's behind the surface. But today, something softened, even for a moment. I noticed the way her fingers brushed the edge of the metal panel as she leaned closer, tense but careful. The faint tremor in her hand made me pause mid-movement. She hadn't said a word, but I could feel her hesitation like electricity in the air. Her eyes darted down at the tools, then back at me, and I thought I saw the shadow of a sigh. "You're patient," she muttered, almost to herself, and then looked away so quickly I wasn't sure I'd heard it. I caught her smile a fraction too late, the one that didn't reach her eyes entirely. And for the first time, I noticed how tired she looked. Those subtle lines at the corners of her eyes, the way her shoulders slumped just slightly after she straightened from leaning over the engine. She tries so hard to appear untouchable, but it's in the quiet moments, the small slips, that I see her. I shifted slightly, brushing grease off my sleeve, careful not to make a move that might push her further away. She's guarded, always so guarded, but there's something fragile in her that she doesn't let anyone touch. And for reasons I can't articulate, I want to see it. She made a sound, half laugh, half breath, when a wrench slipped from my hand. "Careful," she said, and it wasn't a reprimand. There was warmth there, disguised, buried under layers of control and composure. My chest tightened. I glanced at her hands again, noticing the faint scuff on her ring finger and the soft line of a scar along her palm. Small, ordinary things, but they felt monumental in the way she carried them so deliberately, quietly. And suddenly the tension between us wasn't just about proximity. It was something that hummed beneath the surface, impossible to ignore. I cleared my throat, trying to say something ordinary, something safe, but the words refused to come. She caught my hesitation, raising an eyebrow just slightly, and for a moment her usual armor cracked. She let me see it, a flicker of vulnerability, a softness I didn't deserve but couldn't stop noticing. The air between us thickened, unspoken and urgent. She shifted closer to hand me a tool, and our fingers brushed, just barely, yet long enough for heat to spark along my skin. She pulled back instantly, pretending nothing happened, but I saw it, the quiet charge in her eyes, the almost imperceptible catch in her breath. And I knew, without a word, that she felt it too. The rain tapped against the windows like impatient fingers, a steady, soft rhythm that filled the otherwise silent repair shop. We'd stayed late, long after the last customer left, pretending the work still demanded our attention. I was under the hood of a car, and she was beside me, holding a flashlight in one hand, the other brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. We didn't speak for a while. I could feel her presence like a weight next to me, grounding and distracting all at once. Every time our knees brushed under the open hood, my pulse stuttered. I wanted to say something, anything, but words seemed too fragile, too dangerous. "You know," she started, voice low, hesitant, almost lost in the rain. "Sometimes it's easier when no one's watching." I swallowed, hands frozen on the engine. The words weren't a confession exactly, but they carried a quiet honesty that made my chest tighten. She glanced at me, eyes holding mine a moment longer than she intended, and then looked away, toward the rain-streaked window. There was a softness in her expression I rarely saw, a crack in the composed mask she wore so carefully. I wanted to reach out, to tell her that I saw it, that I understood it, but I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a brief, sharp intrusion. She glanced at it, hesitated, then silenced it without opening the message. I caught the name, someone from her past, and felt the sudden tension twist in my gut. My jaw tightened. I wanted to ask, but I didn't. I wanted to step closer, but I didn't. Everything inside me was screaming to break the rules, and yet I stayed frozen. She sighed, a soft, almost imperceptible sound, and turned back to the car. Her hand brushed mine again as she reached for a tool, lingering just a fraction too long. The touch was electric, a spark I couldn't name, and I felt my heart lurch. I wanted to lean in, wanted to close the distance that had been stretching between us for weeks, but I stopped. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside me, restless, urgent, impossible to ignore. "Do you think we pushed too hard?" she asked suddenly, eyes fixed on the engine, but voice carrying something more, something unsaid. I wanted to answer honestly, to tell her that I think about her more than I should, that every glance, every smile, every accidental touch lingers in my mind. But I only shook my head slightly and muttered, "Maybe. Too safe, too small," yet it was all I could give. She looked up then, a flicker of amusement mixed with frustration crossing her face. For a heartbeat, The world shrank to just the two of us, the storm and the charged silence between us. I felt the pull of something impossible, something unspoken, and my chest ached with the restraint I tried to maintain. And then she stepped back to grab a rag, and the moment dissolved like mist. My fingers itched to reach for hers again, to close the gap we'd almost crossed, but I didn't. Not yet. I could still feel the ghost of her touch on my skin, lingering, warm, impossible to forget. We were alone in the shop again, the fluorescent lights humming above, too bright, too steady, leaving nowhere to hide. The engine we'd been working on earlier was abandoned, tools scattered across the floor, a silent witness to everything neither of us had said. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, jaw tight. I noticed the way her shoulders slumped slightly, though she tried to straighten as soon as I looked. There was something in her posture, a quiet weight, and it made me pause mid-step. I can't. I don't know what we're doing, she said finally, voice low, almost a whisper. It wasn't a question, exactly, but it demanded an answer I didn't have. I swallowed hard, feeling my throat tighten. My hands, still dusted with grease, hung at my sides, useless. I wanted to say something clever, something grounding, but there was no cleverness for this, no safe place to hide. She didn't look at me. Her eyes were fixed on the window, on the streaks of rain that had dried to pale trails, but I could feel her looking right at me through the silence. The tension between us was palpable, a fragile thing stretching across the room. Every time you're here, she paused, fingers brushing a metal edge, a micro gesture I couldn't ignore. It's like the world shrinks. And I hate that I feel it. I hate that it matters so much. Her words landed heavier than anything I could have imagined. I wanted to step closer, to offer some comfort, to break the taut thread between us, but I stayed frozen, careful not to collapse the fragile honesty she was risking. I don't know how to, I began, but she cut me off with a quiet shake of her head, as if my voice alone could ruin something delicate. We didn't speak again for a long time. The only sound was the faint hum of the lights and the echo of our breathing. I watched her hands, the small twitch of her wrist, the way she fiddled with the cuff of her sleeve. Every micro-movement screamed more than words ever could. And then she turned to me, finally meeting my gaze. There was a storm behind her eyes, restrained but undeniable. I'm not even sure who I am right now, she admitted, voice trembling ever so slightly. Or what I want, or why it even matters. I couldn't answer. Nothing I said would fit the gravity of the moment. I simply nodded, aware that any word might shatter the fragile bridge of honesty we had just crossed. The silence stretched longer than it should have, and in that quiet, I felt the weight of every stolen glance, every brush of fingers, every unspoken thought between us. It was suffocating and electric all at once. She finally turned back to the tools, shoulders tight, jaw set. I wanted to reach out, to close the distance, but I didn't. Instead, I let the silence linger, letting her words settle between us like dust in the afternoon light. And just as I thought the moment had passed, she whispered, almost to herself, almost to me. I don't want to be the one who ruins everything, but I feel like I already have. I was cleaning up the scattered tools when I noticed the envelope tucked under the edge of the workbench. It wasn't mine. I'd never seen it before, but something about it felt fragile, as though it had been waiting for someone to notice. She came up behind me quietly, her boots barely making a sound on the concrete floor. That's from a long time ago, she murmured, voice softer than usual. She didn't move closer, just stood there, hands loosely clasped, staring at the envelope like it held a ghost. I hesitated, unsure if I should touch it, if touching it would feel like trespassing. But she didn't stop me. I slid it out gently and turned it in my hands. The paper was yellowed, edges fraying, ink slightly smudged. There was a name written in a careful, deliberate hand. Someone from her past, someone she'd clearly loved and lost. She finally spoke, voice low, almost trembling. He was the one I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. Before everything went wrong. Her eyes didn't meet mine, fixed on the floor, but I could see the tension coiled in her shoulders, the way her fingers tightened around each other. I wanted to say something comforting, but I didn't. Instead, I let the quiet stretch between us, letting her memories breathe in the small, dusty shop. I noticed how tired she looked, the faint shadows under her eyes, the way her lips pressed together as if holding in a confession. I never really healed, she admitted, finally looking at me, eyes glistening with something she didn't name. I tried, but sometimes I still feel like I'm stuck there. I swallowed hard. I remembered my own losses, the people I'd let slip away without words, without goodbyes. And in that shared space, a subtle connection formed. Not romantic, not yet, but human, raw, and unavoidable. Without thinking, I said, I think we carry them with us, the ones we lost. But it doesn't mean we can't find pieces of ourselves again. My voice sounded small, unsure, but she didn't roll her eyes or dismiss me. She just nodded, slow, deliberate. She picked up the envelope, tracing the name with a fingertip, and I could see the quake in her chest, the pulse of old grief and quiet longing intertwined. I didn't expect anyone to understand. I wanted to tell her she didn't have to expect anyone to understand, that she could just let it out, let it be messy, but instead, I only said, sometimes just noticing is enough. She gave a faint, almost imperceptible smile, not one of joy, but of acknowledgement, of recognition that someone was there, seeing the weight she carried. And in that moment, something shifted between us, an invisible line redrawn, fragile but undeniable. The envelope slipped from her fingers as she set it down, and our hands brushed briefly, accidentally, a spark of connection passing through that simple contact. She pulled back quickly, almost embarrassed, almost ashamed, but I could see it, the subtle tremor of emotion, quiet but seismic, lingering in her chest like a secret I wasn't meant to know but now did. I watched her exhale slowly, shoulders still tight, eyes looking away, and I realized that nothing would ever feel normal again. The shop was quieter than usual, only the hum of the fluorescent lights and the faint tick of a cooling engine filling the space. We had lingered longer than necessary, neither of us wanting to break the fragile equilibrium that had been building between us for weeks. She sat perched on the edge of a workbench, one boot swinging lazily, the other planted firmly on the concrete. I leaned against a toolbox across from her, watching the rhythm of her movements, the faint brush of fingers over a stray wrench, the subtle tilt of her head, the quiet tension in her shoulders. There was an unspoken gravity here, something that had been stretching between us, and it finally felt ready to settle. I don't know why I keep coming here, she admitted softly, voice low, almost lost in the stillness. You're here, I said simply. That's enough. She let out a breath that was part laugh, part sigh. We've made this complicated, she murmured, and I could feel the vulnerability hidden in the carefully measured words. No, I said, shaking my head. Life's complicated. Us, it's just real. My voice sounded clumsy even to me, but it was true. She looked at me, and I saw that flicker of recognition, of relief, cross her features. Something shifted. For a while, we didn't speak. I noticed her hands resting lightly on the bench, fingertips brushing tools, and I caught the small, almost imperceptible signs of her letting down her guard. Each micro-gesture, her eyes flicking toward mine, the soft exhale she tried to hide, spoke louder than words. I mirrored her closeness subtly, leaning slightly as she shifted, letting my hand hover near hers when reaching for a tool. Then, quietly, our fingers brushed, just the tips, but it was enough. A jolt ran through me, and I could see it echo in her posture. She didn't pull away. She leaned her forehead gently against my shoulder, almost a whisper of a movement, not dramatic, just human, intimate in its simplicity. My chest tightened, not fireworks, not declarations, just the full weight of what had been accumulating between us, finally acknowledged. We stayed that way, silent, shoulder to shoulder, letting the presence itself speak everything we couldn't say. The world outside, the engines, the fluorescent lights, the faint scent of oil and coffee, faded until only the space between us remained. No words were necessary. No promises were spoken. Everything that mattered had already been seen, understood, accepted. When she finally pulled back slightly, her eyes met mine, calm, steady, unreadable. And I realized something undeniable. Some connections aren't rushed, don't need to be named, and yet they're as inevitable as gravity. We didn't speak again. We simply stayed in that quiet space, breathing in sync, until the night ended. And that, I knew, was enough. It's been months since that night in the shop. Sometimes I catch myself tracing the memory of her, how the light fell across her face, the faint scent she always wore, the way her hand brushed mine as if it were the most natural thing in the world. That moment didn't scream or shout. It simply existed, quiet but undeniable, and it changed everything. I've changed, too. I notice patience now, in ways I didn't before. I notice subtleties. How someone's posture can carry stories, how a half-smile can speak volumes. She taught me that without trying, without words, by simply being present and letting me see her fully, flaws and all. She's changed, too, though in quieter ways. She laughs more freely now, though not always at me, sometimes at herself. She lets herself linger in moments, allows imperfection, lets someone in without armor. And somehow, watching her, I've learned that love doesn't always arrive with fireworks or declarations. Sometimes it seeps in, slow, persistent, unavoidable. We still meet in the shop, not out of necessity, but because we want to. Sometimes we talk about work, sometimes we don't speak at all. And yet, even in silence, the connection we built, the trust, the understanding, is palpable. We move around each other with the comfort of people who have seen each other deeply, without expectation, without pressure. I think about the first time I noticed the tremor in her hand, the hesitation in her voice, the way she guarded herself. And I realize now that it was never about fixing her or being fixed myself. It was about noticing, acknowledging, and choosing to stay. That's the kind of love we've learned. Patient, earned, quietly persistent. There's still tension sometimes, subtle reminders that we're two different people, two histories colliding, two imperfect hearts. But it's softer now, more human. And maybe that's what makes it real. Real enough to withstand the ordinary, the mundane, and the everyday choices that life throws at us. I catch myself smiling at the thought of her without reason, her hand brushing mine as we organize tools, her laugh carrying across the shop. The small gestures are enough. They always have been. And when I leave at night, walking past the empty counters and humming lights, I feel the weight of that quiet intimacy still lingering in the air. It's not dramatic. It's not cinematic. But it's ours, and that's enough. So if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Love doesn't always need to shout. Sometimes it's the gentle pull, the quiet presence, the subtle understanding that says, without words, I see you. I stay. And if you've ever felt that kind of connection, even for a moment, maybe you'll understand why some stories don't need fireworks to leave a mark. What's the quiet moment that changed your perspective on love? Share it below. I'd love to hear your story.